Get ourselves started. Welcome. We have our first order of business this morning. We have public hearing. So I'll open the public hearing and ask our Director of Corporate Administration to read aloud the notice.
Good morning. This public hearing is being held to hear from anyone who may be affected by a proposed temporary use permit at 2041 and 2101 Alaska Avenue. The property is north of the Peace River Regional District office, owned by Gary Loisel. The use is for an equipment and pipeline supplies storage yard with a temporary office trailer and personnel parking area for a maximum of 12 months. Permits for the same use on this property were approved in 2004, 2010, and 2014. There were no comments received regarding this notice.
Thank you, Brenda. So I'll call for first time for any comments. And for a second time, any comments? And for a third time, any comments? Thank you. We'll close the public hearing. And our next item is a public hearing also, and I'll ask Brenda to read aloud the notice.
Thank you. This public hearing is being held to receive comments from anyone that may be affected by the proposed amendments to the city's annual business license and regulation bylaw number 3758. The proposed amendment will allow for mobile food vending services on specified city-owned properties between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. The properties identified in this pilot project include the Harry Morrow Ballpark and Paul Loisel Soccer Park, the Malzero Rotary Lake Park, the NAR Park on Alaska Avenue, and Kin Park South in the tennis court Ball Diamond area. The notice was advertised in the local paper and posted on the city's website. Staff also contacted the two leaseholders, the Malzero Park Society and the Art Gallery. Both leaseholders were agreeable to the pilot project and assisted in determining an appropriate location for food vendors on the property. Background information has been included in the public hearing agenda, as well as one letter that was received in response to the notifications from Melanie Treble, owner-operator of Alcan Smokehouse, who is in favor of allowing mobile food vendors at various recreational areas in the city, but opposed to the location at the NAR Park, as it would affect the vitality of the downtown business core. And there were no other responses received.
Thank you, Brenda. And report 4.1 as the report from Director of Corporate Administration regarding the annual business license amendment bylaw. That's showing on my agenda, sorry.
4.1.
4.1. So that should be in.
Oh, yes, the
Pages
memo
4 to
just
7.
with the background information.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call for a first time for any comments. Councillor Parslow, you had a comment?
I just learned to flag that I agree with Melanie Treble, and I'm also reflecting that there's a business right adjacent to the museum, the Swiss bakery, so I, at some appropriate time, would want to make an amendment to the bylaw to delete the NAR Park location.
Okay, and we can do that. That input can go into the reading of the first three readings of the bylaw.
Actually, the locations are not included in the bylaw, but they can just be amended by resolution.
Okay, thank you. Second time for any comments? And a third time for any comments? Thank you. We'll close the public hearing. We'll now open the regular meeting of City Council for Monday, May 8th, 2017. We'll call the meeting to order. First item of business, new councillor business 2.1. We have a memo from Councillor Javetkov regarding development cost charges.
Okay, I'll read it out. It's been in the agenda, but I'll read it out anyways, I guess. Whereas the provincial government guidebook regarding development cost charges explains the intent of this fee on page 4, and in quotes it says the development cost charges are fees that municipalities and regional districts choose to collect from new development to help pay the cost of off-site infrastructure services that are needed to accommodate growth. This is the provincial government's guide to levying development cost charges. The intent is to apply this fee to new development, as stated in the quotes. The Dawson Creek City bylaw conflicts with the intent of the development cost charge. In the bylaw, section 4, it says every person who B, obtains a building permit, including a permit authorizing the construction, alteration, or extension of a building, must pay to the city development cost charges in accordance with the applicable schedule attached hereto. The 3 schedules attached to the bylaw prescribe specific charges for all various structure types with specific exclusion of secondary suites. Section 561, subsection 9 of the Local Government Act provides for an exemption for value of work less than $50,000, except where a bylaw applies. The city bylaw overrides this section of the Act as it specifies all permits. The bylaw for development cost charges, or cost charge, is inconsistent with guidance from the provincial government, and it appears that the development cost charges are not being applied consistently, as some building permits are charged and others are not charged. Existing structures have already contributed to infrastructure through monthly water sewer infrastructure charges, so the additional development cost charge is an additional duplicate charge to some businesses. I move that administration amend the bylaw regarding development cost charges to require charges be levied on new development only, as that is where the future pressures will develop.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rogers. Discussion. Duncan. So I'm going to just I'll move to Duncan first.
So through your worship, we've had some discussion about DCCs. Myself and Councillor Javatkoff, he's come in and asked some questions, and some other council. The bylaw and the intent of this bylaw is applied as per the Local Government Act, as per the original intent. There were meetings with developers. We went through a 6-month process. If council wants to change that intent and apply it differently, we can take a look at that if that's what council wants to do. But right now, it applies to new renovations and expansion. And the purpose is to fund future growth. So through the Local Government Act, if somebody is developing or building and it won't have any impact on the system, they have the ability to provide engineer drawings that says that it'll have no impact and they don't have to pay that DCC as per the Local Government Act. So although it's not in our bylaw, and maybe the wording in the bylaw needs to be changed to exactly reflect the Local Government Act, which we can do, but it's all there. The components are there. The intent is there. If you want to change the intent and not look at expansion and not look at renovation, we can do that. Although my understanding from the original consultation is developers said, if I'm going to develop some land and I'm going to have to pay for growth and pressure on the system, if somebody wants to rezone or change a building from a restaurant to a car wash or from a single dwelling to a multi-dwelling, they should also have to pay.
Thank you. So Councillor Rogers and Councillor Schumann, you had your question. Did you have your hand up?
I'm good.
Sorry, Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, no, everything that I agree. There should not be development cost charges charged to somebody that's wanting to renovate a building. Perfect case in point would be down by the traffic circle, the new liquor store that's just opened up down there. You know, that building has been there for I don't know how many years, and it's been renovated a couple times. It just underwent a major renovation, but yet the amount of people working out of that building and the impact on our infrastructure is probably less than what the existing building is. I think that there's less people working there now than there would have been working in when it was a dealership, because there was more people in and out. So I look at that, and I look at if also if it's a renovation, the tax dollars have been there for several years. They've been paying into it, and switching it from from one part to another part, like just changing the business. I don't think that that's a real significant impact. You know, I just look at all of the renovations that have happened in Dawson Creek over the years, and there hasn't been any buildings that have had a significant impact on our infrastructure that have undergone a renovation. So therefore, I would say that, you know, it should apply as what the intent would be for new construction and not renovations.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councillor Wilbur and then Councillor Javetkov.
Yeah, so that particular building that Councillor Rogers is referring to, there's actually 2 businesses in that building. So there is
Same amount
not
of
1,
people.
2, but for me, I am fine the way it sits because sometimes renovations do make changes to that infrastructure for the water, the sewer, all of that, and maybe they're upgrading an old system and tying into a new one, and that does cause an effect. And so the responsibility of those changes, because they're going to get it on the other end, is to the developer. So I do not have a problem with the way it sits. I think it's well covered. I think it's in line with what the province is saying. And reality is, that is growth. So if you're making major changes, then you are putting some burden on that particular area of the system. It has to be paid for. So gone are the days where it was like $25 to hook up to city services. You need to hook up to it. You're going to have to pay for that future expansion and growth. And depending on what your renovations are, if you're not interrupting that system, you're not paying those charges. So it's really not an issue. Where you pay is where you're changing the system.
Councillor Javetkov.
Yeah, I disagree with Duncan's interpretation. The guidelines in the government document that introduced the development cost charges is, to me, it's clear in simple language. It says development cost charges are fees that municipalities and regional districts choose to collect from new development. So that doesn't mean renovations. That doesn't mean remodeling inside of your business. That means new development to me. In simple terms, I guess you can adapt all different interpretations, but the words new development to me are pretty clear. The other thing is that in the bylaw, in the existing bylaw, it says every person who obtains a building permit, including a permit authorizing the construction, alteration, or extension of a building, must pay to the city development cost charges in accordance with the applicable schedule attached hereto. So that means every building permit. That's what it says. It says every building permit. And every building permit, to me, in simple terms, means every building permit. And I know that there are building permits, one in particular to Legacy Signs, that wasn't charged development cost charges. The schedules that apply, basically all they do is set out the rates, and they exclude secondary suites. That's the only modification to that statement. So I don't agree with Duncan's interpretation for that reason. The other thing is that when you have this cost, this charge, and I think it's just an additional tax, or it's a fee that they have to pay, but added costs can be a deterrent to developing or upgrading a business. Like we've got a situation right now, a development permit here in our agenda for Reg Norman Trucking, where they want to put in an office building. They want to upgrade their operation. So they're simply replacing an old office with a new one. They're not adding any more pressure or any more requirements on the system, but they will be charged a development cost charge. And I don't think it's fair. They've been here since probably the 50s, and they've been paying their water and sewer and all the additional costs and the infrastructure charges. Infrastructure charges are there to look after what they're using, the system. and they're not changing their use. And as Duncan said, the intent is to where you've got additional use, and administration has put the responsibility on the proponent to prove that he's not increasing his use. Well, you know, that's doesn't seem right to me. I mean, we know that they're not increasing their use. They've been there for all these years. So why would they be charged an additional development cost charge? It doesn't make sense to me. So, like I say, improving a business facility does not put more pressure on our water system or our sewer system. All it does is improve the city. It may even increase taxes.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers, then Councillor Schumann, then Councillor Parslow.
Yeah, it would increase taxes because it's making the building itself through a renovation more valuable. Secondary suites being excluded, well, you put a secondary suite in, and essentially you just doubled the size of the use of the building. You just doubled the use. It's like taking one business and putting it into two. I think that if you're going to do that, then it should be the same. Economic development. We talk a lot about economic development in Dawson Creek, and number one thing that I've always thought about for supporting economic development is your local businesses. Those are the ones that you have to support because those are the ones that are already existing, and you know, and you have to help support them to expand their business as well. If a business wants to expand, I'm all for that. If they were renovating to expand, I'm good with that. They shouldn't be cost development charges unless it was something really significant. So I look at it and go, if you want to support your local businesses, then why are you throwing more barriers at them through development cost charges? I just think that if it's brand new construction, that's what those cost charges were meant for, was for the pressures that brand new construction does. I think renovations, all you're doing is you're just throwing up another barrier for those businesses.
Thank you, Councillor Schumann.
Through you to staff, I'm just curious. So when we went through this whole process to bring in our DCCs, all of that information went to the province, and is that the case? And then they had to sort of sign off on our
Correct.
bylaws and stuff like that. So I trust your interpretation because it's obviously not going against the province, the charter or anything like that, given that they signed off on it. So I'm thinking that Duncan's interpretation is probably correct.
Duncan?
So through your worship, all DCC bylaws need to be approved by an inspector within the ministry. So our bylaw has been approved. If council chooses to change this bylaw, we'll have to go through that process again. We would recommend that public consultation piece again with the developers, and then it'll have to be approved. It is a process. It is not an overnight. It would take, you know, last time it took 6 months. I would assume it would be similar. Also, as far as that validity, a lot of our bylaw actually is verbatim the Local Government Act, in particular around the construction, alteration, and extension. That language is right out of the Local Government Act. So, yeah. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Parslow?
Yes, I tend to support the motion. I think some people here have hit the concerns I have, so I won't reiterate those. But I think that an amendment to this motion is necessary. I'm just thinking of the cases where existing development wishes to change its function, and it requires an expanded line, water line, you know, going from, let's say, 2 to 4 inches or whatever it is. And therefore they would be having an increased draw. But most renovations, I keep hearing from people how there are some people doing well, but there's a lot of people it's a struggle. And and why I can't rationalize in my mind why, in the case of the example that Councillor Javakov just used, we're going to hit Reg Norman trucking with a development service charge. An office is an office. But if that office was to change into a car wash, then I would support development service charges. So I want to propose an amendment to the motion, if I may.
Yep.
Okay. The amendment would be inserted on after the word new development, and have then read, and existing buildings where water connections are expanded.
Okay. Could you read it again?
Yes.
The whole thing.
And existing buildings where water connections are expanded. I'm trying to think of the word for gone from 2 inches to 4 inches.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Javekov? Go ahead.
Yeah, I second the motion. I guess, can I speak on it too?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that bothered me, I guess, in the old bylaw is that it was incumbent on the proponent to prove that he wasn't increasing the pressure on the system. And I think it should be the opposite. I think we need a system where, you know, in the case where there's a development on an existing building that is upgrading the use, like increasing the use, that it should be the city that identifies that through the submission. So the city, like if an obvious one would be changing from an office building to a car wash. So that's obvious, but there could be other situations where you're maybe changing a warehouse building into a multi-residence facility or something, where you're obviously increasing the use, and it should be incumbent on the city to make that determination, as opposed to having the proponent justify it or whatever.
So I read the development cost charge as you refer to in where municipalities and regional districts choose to collect from new development, and I guess the interpretation of new development is where is that brand new construction or is that new development that's occurring as a result of a renovation? So you're having new development occur in an old building, and that can absolutely happen. And so it's that interpretation of, to me, in terms of how that kind of flows in there. And I guess the aspect to me that I think about in terms of the development cost charge bylaw is the second piece of that is to help pay for the cost of off-site infrastructure services that are needed to accommodate the growth. And so it's not about the pressure that it's putting on the system, whether you're adding a 2-inch or 4-inch or 6-inch. It's about the future growth of the community, where you need to enhance distribution, where you have to add new water reservoir, you have to add new treatment. It adds to the ability of building that reserve for the long-term ability to add and build the infrastructure services that benefit the entire community. And so when we talk about our fiscal gap, that to me is where I relate the DCCs are intended to help offset that long-term pressure that a community faces in building the reserve to help build the long-term infrastructure services to accommodate the growth of the city. And so that's how I think about it and how I see it. And so anybody, if we don't do that, if you don't have that system in place, the fiscal gap then is exacerbated, and it only puts more pressure on existing residents and existing businesses who aren't doing anything, because the pressures to accommodate that future growth and adding additional distribution system, a treatment system, storage, supply, all comes back then to raising the user fees, because you don't have that fund that's building from the DCCs. I guess the decision, the determination is, as you've raised in the motion, is does that renovation project that takes place incorporate into that new development, and should it then be applicable to DCCs? And so it's a tough one, I think, in terms of, because I think about building the infrastructure for the long term for the city is that fiscal gap, and how do we make sure that we build those reserves necessary to help fund that future growth. And when I read that piece about to help pay the cost of off-site infrastructure services that are needed to accommodate growth, that's for the whole city. So and I'm not arguing the point about, you know, whether infrastructure for adding additional infrastructure to the city in renovations, as you've outlined in the motion. That's how I just think about it. So Councillor Rogers and Councillor Javette.
I was going to make my next point would have been, but you kind of covered some of it. Like when we talk about water and sewer, okay, we're going to be renovating a building. We might end up with a bigger water line going to the building, or, you know, a larger sewer line going into our infrastructure. But our water and sewer, that's a standalone thing. Like that pays for itself already anyways. And then how great would it be if somebody renovated a building, like even a commercial building, and they had to increase their water meter size because commercial water rates are a heck of a lot more than what residential water rates are. And therefore you get the sewer going, like you're gonna get your sewer infrastructure charges and stuff like that you get on your bills. I think that, you know, that water and sewer pretty much pays for itself the way it is right now. So I think that this is a benefit if it does get expanded. And then plus, you know, you do get the benefit of the tax rate. I think it's a win-win-win. And why are you wanting to charge somebody more money for renovating a building? It just seems ridiculous.
Councillor Javette.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the purpose of it is to help pay for future costs, like increases in the supply. So right now we're increasing the throughput in the water plant because, you know, we got to have a need for more water. So those kind of costs are covered off. Not by, to me, it's not fair to charge the existing users who have been paid for the system all along. But the new developments that have created this need, they're the ones that need to pay or should be contributing to those improvement costs or those expansion costs. And I guess to me it's fairness. It's a question of fairness. Like, and you know, the deterrent. I mean, so somebody wants to improve their facility, but we're going to nail them with this cost, and it's not consistent. You know, I guess that's the problem I have. If it was, and I think the amendment will help to cover it off. Yes, you could have an existing operation in town that change their use levels. So then they should be contributing because they're contributing to future pressures. So.
And I'm going to go back to the fairness component, because the fairness then, if you don't build this reserve to help pay for it, then the fairness, it's not fair that everybody in the community then is going to face additional pressures to add to the build on the growth of that infrastructure if you don't have a way to close that gap, right?
But if you're being selective and you hit Reg Dorman just because he wants to upgrade his office, is that fair?
Yeah.
You know, to me it's not, but I guess...
Duncan and then Shayla.
So through your worship, I can put a number. So the raw water reservoir, $700,000 came from DCCs.
No.
Just to put a number to it.
Shayla?
I guess for you to staff, so there must be some determination, say, between a major renovation or building a whole new structure compared to putting up a wall to make an office.
Yes, and so through your worship, again, the Local Government Act says that they have to be impacting that future system and putting pressure on that system before they need to provide a DCC. In some cases, it's not clear. In some cases, they may not even be tied into water infrastructure where it becomes very clear.
Okay, so Duncan kind of answered my second question, sorry, but so really some of the stuff that we're doing now, we wouldn't have been able to do had we not had DCC charges, because water and sewer collection wouldn't have covered it alone. For example, the $700,000.
And so, through your worship, to Shelley, $700,000 came from the DCCs. If we didn't have that DCC fund, would we have room in general capital?
Yeah, through your worship, that project, I think it was about 7 million, 6 million. would not have gone forward this year without the DCCs.
Councillor Rogers and Councillor Parslow.
I'm just sitting here going, come on, like how much of that $700,000 came from renovations?
They come from the DCCs, not from renovation. DCC.
Yeah, but the DCC charges are charged to a renovation. Like that's, okay, that's brand new construction, like, you know, is it 90% brand new construction? And the other 10% is from a renovation? I don't know.
700,000 come from DCCs. Without that, we wouldn't have built the project this year.
Right, I'm not saying we get rid of development cost charges, I'm just saying we get rid of development cost charges on renovations.
Thank you. Councillor Parslow.
Councillor Rogers said exactly what I was going to say. The issue is not about DCCs, it's about the application.
And to me, it's about the issue of fiscal gap. Now, so we're at 9 o'clock, so we either got to table this or we got to move forward. Are you ready for the question? Yeah. Question on the motion? On the amendment, sorry, of the size of the water lines after that. All those in favor? Opposed? Defeated. On the motion. Ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? It's defeated. So we're on to 9 o'clock and on to, we have to get to our first delegation. And that's Shirley Grayston, Dawson Creek Sons of Norway, in attendance regarding Norwegian Constitution Day. Wow. Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you guys?
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Wouldn't be fair, somebody got one and not everybody.
So, it is my pleasure this morning to read this proclamation. Whereas Norwegian Constitution Day is the National Day of Norway and is an official national holiday observed on May 17th each year. And whereas many among Norwegians, the day is referred to simply as Syttende Mai, or Syttende Mai, both meaning May 17th. So, how do I feel? I can speak Norwegian. Whereas this is a day on which celebrations mark the signing of the Norwegian Constitution in Eidsvoll. And whereas on May 17th, Norwegian Canadians will express their appreciation and pride for their heritage through observance of Norway's Constitution Day. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim May 17th, 2017 to be Norwegian Constitution Day in Dawson Creek.
Yay!
Congratulations, and the floor is yours to say a few words.
Okay. So this signing of this constitution happened 103 years ago. So every year since then, Norway certainly celebrates on May 17th. And we like to fly our flag on that day for sure, just to help them celebrate. And I haven't been there on Constitution Day, but I've seen pictures, and boy, Oslo is pretty full of costumes and parades and right up to the King's Palace. So it is quite a big event in Norway on May 17th.
Well, thank you so much for coming in this morning. It's always a fun time, it's springtime, to be able to get the proclamation signed for this Sunday morning. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for flying the flag for us.
And next up, we have Judith Chin, Vice President of the Dawson Creek and District Hospital Auxiliary Society of Local Healthcare and Attendance regarding the Dawson Creek and District Hospital Auxiliary. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, you guys. How are you? Good to see you.
Pretty in pink.
Nice. Everybody wearing pink? Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Nice to see you. Whereas healthcare is an ever-changing landscape and our hospital continues to face the change and challenge of healthcare reform in our province. And whereas it is important we continue to take pride in our hospital and to acknowledge the dedicated hospital auxiliary members, that invest their time and efforts into our community hospitals. And whereas for 85 years, the Dawson Creek and District Hospital Auxiliary has supported patients, visitors, and staff, operating the hospital gift shop, snack cart, and library cart, and raising funds each year to aid in the purchase of much-needed medical equipment and supplies to support patient comfort. The auxiliary annually provides 2 scholarships to support local high school students who plan to pursue advanced education and healthcare. And whereas the Dawson Creek and District Hospital Auxiliary was formed in 1932, and it is estimated that over the last 85 years, the auxiliary has contributed over 250,000 volunteer hours and raised over $1 million to support healthcare in our community. And whereas healthcare touches all of us, and the steadfast efforts of the hospital auxiliary members of the City of Dawson Creek deserves a day of its own, now therefore I do hereby proclaim May 12, 2017 as Dawson Creek and District Hospital Auxiliary Day in Dawson Creek. There you go. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to say a big thank you for this day that honors our past, celebrates our present, and embraces our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming in. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming in. Next up, we have Chelsea, Ekaterina from the City of Dawson Creek, Crystal Brown from Northern Health in regards to Drinking Water Week proclamation.
Morning. How are you? David Gerlin. Days? I don't know. 6.5 minutes.
Oh, is it? One more council meeting.
I was like, can you?
You'll know when it's down. You'll know when it's down to days. She'll be telling everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas human health is dependent upon an abundant supply of pure, clear drinking water. And whereas safety, quality, and abundance of water can only be safeguarded by sound environmental protection, appropriate treatment, and properly maintained distribution systems. And whereas we are all stewards of the water infrastructure and watersheds, which future generations depend upon, and whereas each citizen of our community is called upon to help protect our source waters from pollution, to practice water conservation, and to get involved in local water issues. And whereas the federal, provincial, and local governments, as well as concerned organizations, are cognizant and supportive of measures which promote safe, clean, and abundant water, and responsible wastewater management. And whereas one such measure involves heightening public awareness of the value of our drinking water resources and encourages the public to promote this awareness, now therefore I do hereby proclaim and invite all citizens in our community to actively participate in the week of May 7th to 13th, 2017 as Drinking Water Week in Dawson Creek. There you go. Congratulations. The floor is yours.
So myself, Katerina, and Crystal would all like to say thank you for being part of Water Week and being stewards of water in our community, as it is very important. We have a lot of different projects on the go this year for water. So again, big, exciting things are happening in our world. We also, for this week, we have launched a coloring contest. You may have seen in the Mirror newspaper the coloring sheet. And we partnered with Northern Toy Box to actually do pick up and drop off of the coloring sheet. And you may also note that the coloring diagram is actually our system now. So Katerina so fantastically created our system, so you can actually see from source the Kaskatna to Ayers Pump House water treatment, through wastewater treatment, reclaim, industry uses, municipal use for flower watering, and then out to the Poos in the Arctic Ocean. So, woohoo! That's pretty cool.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Awesome.
And great artwork.
Yeah.
Leave this down. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Next up, we have Peter Nielsen from the city, Pauline Swanson and Lakeview Credit Union, last year's challenge winner, Jamie Maxwell from Greasy Chains Bike Club, and the RCMP and the Bike Patrol in regards to our Cycling to Work, School, and Commuter Challenge Week proclamation.
How'd you get here, Jamie?
Not the same way you did.
Well, these boots give it. Next year after retirement, we'll see.
Good morning, good morning. Whereas cycling, walking, transit, and carpooling are recognized as beneficial, active, and shared modes of environmentally responsible means of transportation, and whereas the City of Dawson Creek recognizes the benefit of an active, healthy lifestyle for its citizens, and whereas the City of Dawson Creek recognizes the vital importance of taking action to reduce our harmful impact on the environment, and whereas the City of Dawson Creek encourages all its citizens to take part in the enjoyment and benefits of cycling, walking, transit, and carpooling. Now therefore, I do hereby proclaim the week of May 29th to June 4th as Cycling to Week Work and School Week, and June 4th to 10th as Commuter Challenge Week in Dawson Creek.
Okay.
Next year. All right, thank you. Good to see you. Thanks, Jamie. Floor is yours.
Oh yeah, do you want to talk about?
Well,
Is that for the mayor?
yeah,
Oh,
sure,
sorry.
this is. No, my wife couldn't make it.
Do you like to work?
Yeah.
This is, I guess, last year's trophy, and I'm just here on behalf of my wife who won this last year, and she couldn't make it. She's not available just this morning, so I just got a phone call 10 minutes ago to drop this back off. So for next year's winner.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. And our next delegation this morning, 6.5, is we have the Tourism Advisory Committee in attendance regarding our tourism recommendation. We have Ryan and Rod. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you
all.
guys. Floor is
Your worship.
yeah, Mark, would like to introduce.
Before they start, I would just like to acknowledge that that all of those people that were on that committee, you know, they're on their own time, their own dime, and they're there for our community and stuff like that. So I just would like to tell all those people they have my respect, and thank you very much for doing what you guys did.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Floor is yours.
So, the Tourism Advisory Committee has met many times. I think it's been 3 or 4 times throughout, actually I think it's more than that, over this last 6 or 8 months. In the report, you can see the members of the Tourism Advisory Committee. And through this process, the focus has been on the governance and how tourism may be run, not the day-to-day or the plans or the actions with it, because those were already been approved here at council. But the missing gap was when Northern BC Tourism Association decided to give, I guess, notice back to mayor and council or to the city to pull from the contract. So the Tourism Advisory Committee met, and we looked at, we reviewed the terms of reference. We hashed around a ton of different things, even some of the operational stuff where we pulled back and said that's not our mandate. Our mandate is to talk about governance and structure. And so we went through a process again from over a year and a half ago. The tourism group then reviewed governance with Grant Thornton. And again, we used that same process to evaluate the different governance structures and models here again. And so with that, a lot of hours, a lot of debate, and the end result is the recommendation that I believe, and the report that's been put forward to you, which you'll be dealing with later. But I think it has been a very helpful process. I think there's some new faces and bodies at the table that was really helpful. I think it was engaging, and it really brought, I think, awareness of tourism and the complexities and what tourism does for the community. Ron, do you have any comments?
No, I just thought it was an overall really good process. There's a number of times we went back to get more information and more research, so it wasn't taken lightly. And like Ryan said, a number of times we went back to the mandate for our focus and stuff like that in terms of reference. So.
Yeah, the end result is we looked at whether government should do it or a crown court model or a nonprofit or a not-for-profit, and so there's different evaluations here that you can see, and the structure is also a part attached to the report. Is a, let me just make sure I'm going to call it what it's actually called, is the transition document. So it gives you an idea of, over the next while, the amount of work or things that need to be done with respect to transitioning from Northern BC tourism through to whoever the other or new operator might be. And so as part of the recommendation, I believe, states that we look to extend the transition period from, I believe it was September through to December, because if it was to be September, you'd be using the visitor season and those resources to make sure that the visitors' needs were being taken care of, would be moved to transitioning of moving phone lines and bank accounts and starting a whole bunch of stuff. And so the Tourism Advisory Committee felt that the year moving from September to December would give that extra time at the end of the visitor season to ensure that a smooth transition would happen instead of rushing it, because in some cases some of that notice would have to happen in the next 30 days, and we don't believe that's would be a very smart or prudent step, considering that we're going into the start of the visitor season.
Thank you, Ryan. Rod, any questions? Councillor Rogers?
I'd just like everybody to know that binder that's sitting there, we read all of that. And there was more. So it was a pretty big nut, and we were meeting every couple of weeks and stuff like that. So I even lost track of how many meetings we had. So it's just, but it was a process.
Perfect. Well, I know certainly on behalf of council, it's been a really important, significant bit of work for us. We really appreciate the efforts of Councillor Rogers taking it on, and all of the committee members who signed up and stepped up and said they'd be willing to get involved and engage and help provide some direction to that tourism component for our community. So I know I speak on behalf of council how much we appreciate everybody's efforts in getting us to today, and hopefully we can move forward with some recommendations later in Mayor's Business that will continue to move it forward in a positive way. So I want to thank you guys for coming in this morning, give us a presentation and the update on it, and we will bring it forward into Mayor's Business.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So that ends delegations. We'll take a 7-minute recess. Ourselves back to order, and we're back into our agenda at 2.2, Councillor Business. We have a memo from Councillor Javetkov, competitive bids for expenditures.
Yeah, we'll take another run at it.
Let's go again.
Okay, I'll read out the information. Whereas the purchasing policy of the City of Dawson Creek requires competitive bids for expenditures as follows. $2,000 to $49.99, 2 verbal quotes. $5,000 to $14,999, 3 written quotes. $15,000 to $74,999, competitive bidding. And $75,000 plus competitive bidding. I move that all expenditures, including money that is committed to supplement second-party purchases, are held to the same standard as specified in the purchasing policy.
Thank you. Seconded? Councillor Parslow, discussion. So, did you want to speak? Go ahead. Councillor Roger?
Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I just wonder what what's the policy on competitive bids now? Can I ask that question to staff, please?
Duncan?
So through your worship, we have a purchasing policy that outlines competitive bidding and some sole sourcing opportunities, and it has the values that are included in the councillor's motion. Just one piece if I can add to it. One concern that I do have is the city goes through a fairly onerous tender process that's legal, and there's a lot of litigation around that tender process. I don't know that some of the non-profit groups that operate some of our buildings and receive some of that funding could do this with the internal resources that they have. I believe they are using competitive bidding, and we can tighten that language up within those operating agreements and leases if council likes. However, to go to the full-blown city system might be a little onerous on those groups.
Okay, so, and I just want to ask the question about the supplement second-party purchases. And so, can you give a description of that, Councillor Javetkov, what your thought is on what those second-party purchases would be, or who those groups would be?
Well, I referred to Duncan. When I talked to Duncan, he said there are many purchases that the city doesn't do themselves personally, but they farm it out and contribute to it. So, you know, what they all are, I'm not sure. Okay. I guess my concern is that it's public money, so we need to ensure that we get the best deal that we can. Yeah. And for example, when I was president of the Mile Zero Park Society, we got money from the city. At that point, we were getting $66,000 a year, and any purchases that we made sure that we had either checked the prices, got quotes for smaller purchases, or got bids where we replaced the floor in the shed out there. We actually got bids from three providers. I didn't see where there was a bunch of technical aspect to getting the bids. You know, we told them what we wanted, and they submitted bids, and we selected the low bid. So I guess you can complicate it. But I just think the purchasing policy here, it's about 6 or 8 pages long. It's a good policy, and I think it's consistent with the provincial policy that I'm familiar with from the Forest Service. It's just a way to ensure that you're getting, you know, the best price for what you're going after, and especially with public money. I mean, if it's our personal money, we have the option of doing whatever we want. But with public money, I think there's, you know, it's important that we try and get the best deal we can.
Sure.
And as far as the projects, I don't know. Like, I'm familiar with the Mile Zero Park Society one. You know, I guess some of these projects, well, Duncan, you know, there might be some with the arenas or curling rink or Encana Center or Lakota Center, or, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that was what I was thinking more about, those second-party purchases. So organizations or groups that the city flow some money to, either in grants or different operating things like the Mile Zero Park or the Art Gallery or the Lakota Center or the arenas, the minor hockey for the concession. If we say they're going to be held to that same standard in our purchasing policy, do they have, my question is, I don't know, do they have the ability to maintain that same standard in terms of the protocols we put on under our purchasing policy for tender and all that stuff? That's my only question. So, Duncan?
So, through your worship, council has a previous direction to staff to bring back a report on city facilities and leasing, and so Brenda's going to take that opportunity to create a bit of a template for our leases moving forward and those operating agreements. If council's looking at competitive bidding, we can include something in there to make sure that language is tightened up. And I think what Councillor Javetkov is saying is he's not looking for that full-blown tender process, which the city, when we interpret competitive bidding over $15,000, we go to a public procurement where we advertise on websites and we have official tender openings, and we do it very formal. I don't believe, just listening to Councillor Javetkov, that's what he's looking for. If you want something lesser, and just to ensure that there's that transparency and that competitiveness within that bidding, I think those groups can do that as far as getting quotes, as Councillor Javetkov mentioned, and I think that's happening already. We wouldn't allow that any other way, right? But we can lock that up within this agreement or this template that Brenda's working on.
Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, I assumed all along that the city purchasing policy applied to any money that we gave to other organizations. It's tax money. Why would we suddenly have one standard for ourselves handling tax money and then just allow some other lesser standard? My recollection with the Mile Zero part with capital expenditures, they get just 3 quotes, but I'm just going back to my former lives when I received, no, I didn't, the organizations I was either the secretary of or president, we received funding from the federal government, and there were some stipulations that we had to sign off and that we had to submit documentation whereby we had got verbal or written, what depends on the level. So when this, and then I go back to the notion of when we gave direction to staff around global, the renegotiation with global, all the concerns that some of us heard in the community that subsidiaries were getting things without the local companies having any opportunity, that we directed staff to renegotiate something. Then I read something in, so we had more competitive, and I believe, not more competitive, more opportunity for local businesses to compete. And I believe that's happened. But so I want to ask a question that I think is related to this, that I believe Ryan McIver sent to you concerning a clause in the agreement concerning their handling of purchases. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. When was that negotiated? Was that just inserted into our current contract with them, or was it with the first one?
So Spectra or Global has their own policy manual, and within that policy manual they have purchasing policies and sole award or direct award policies, and that was an insert from their purchasing policy.
Oh, so supplementary, that was not part of the contract, that was part of their policy?
That's their policy, yeah.
So what do we do where their policies contradict our policies? Is the money still tax money?
Yeah, so I think through your worship, of all of the agreements that we have right now out there, Spectra Global probably has the most thorough and the most onerous policies. If we wanted to move in that direction with other organizations, I'd probably template some of the stuff in their agreement and move that into the other agreements. However, yeah, I don't know, and I'd have to look back. It's an agreement that was made before I started on whether those policies were actually included in the sign-off and the overall package. I'm not certain.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'm just, Shelley?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Mayor. So the city's purchasing policy is very onerous and basically talks about accountability, transparency, talks about TILMA, talks about all the provincial regulations out there that we have to abide by. So highly regulatory, okay? And all the tenders, RFPs, we have a lot of money being spent on capital has to go through these different levels of the purchasing policy. So if it is council's will to pass on this purchasing policy to any organization that we give money to, it's kind of a big process. So I would recommend that a public consultation process be undertaken so that groups are aware of what the city is doing, because you're basically taking that regulation and you're expanding it to any group that the city gives money to. I'm not sure that's your intent through the discussion that you've had, but they should have some discussion around that regulation. They need to be educated on it, and then following that, we would have to monitor and ensure there's compliance. Okay, so a couple of projects that the city has done in the past, the Splash Park, some capital projects with different not-for-profit groups, the golf course, the skiing not the downhill, but the other one, we would have to go in there and make sure that they actually did all the regulatory requirements of the purchasing policy. I'm not sure you want to do that, and I'm not sure there's a problem. I think every not-for-profit organization has their own controls that they put over purchasing, so we would need some clarification if you were going one way or the other.
And I guess that's just my only thinking is, and I think about the Mile Zero Park Society are building a splash park, and it was it's a big project. I would expect up in the, certainly more than 15. So if we layer in that to be held to the same standard as specified in our purchasing policy, then that would put them into that regime where they would have to do that competitive process. And I'm not sure, like you say, that they're not doing it. I just don't understand it well enough to know whether they have the capacity and ability to do it or not, and I can't answer the question. I don't know. Councillor Schumann and then Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, I'm just curious as to why Councillor Javetkov brought this. Like, is there some problems happening out there that, like, I'm just curious what inspired this. Is there some issues going on that I'm not aware of that we must now do this to our organizations that are receiving funding, or I'm just curious to know what inspired this whole thing.
Councillor Javetkov?
Well, I guess my my history with the government, we've always been under the same type of policy where we're looking after public money, money that we're taking from the public, and there was a pretty high priority on looking after it, so that we're getting the best deal. The processes, and I agree, this is, it's a policy that's to implement it on a large scale, like on a large amount, especially, over 75,000. But there's provisions for, being selective about it as well. There's, it's a good policy. I just saw the secondary handling of money as a loophole, because there's nowhere where it says that we can't, hand over $500,000 to somebody else to look after, and they don't have to follow the policy. To me, that's a loophole that should be covered off. I guess you can complicate it, and you can bring in all these complications, and we tend to do that. But my experience when we did the floor in the shed, it was around 25,000. Just asking for bids is not a complicated process. Like, I guess you can complicate it, and government tends to complicate things, but all I did was say, look, we want the floor with these this criteria. What is the cost going to be for a completed job? And we got 3 bids, and we selected the low bid. I think for the most part, when we give money to the Arts Council or to whoever, we just say, here's the policy that we use, and we'd like you to, follow the same process. Yeah, we want to make sure that we're getting the best value for the dollar. Now, what happens in a lot of cases, and it happened to us too, we get dealing with a provider, and I'm sure the city does, gets into that same rut sometimes, a provider that provides a good service, and it's easy. You don't have to do a lot of explaining. Just phone them up and say, look, we need this job done. Can you handle it? Can you do it for us, right away, like we need it right away? And so you don't go out for bids. You just use that supplier. And it gets to be a habit, and it's convenient and easy. And that happens with a lot of organizations. So all this is just ensuring that when you're spending money, that you're doing it, with the cost effectiveness, I guess, in mind.
Yeah, and so I completely agree with the statement about, we want to make sure they're competitive. We want to make sure they're using high standards, and when they are spending money, that sometimes they're getting some benefit from the city. It's the policy that we pass, and so somebody has to ensure that policy is being adhered to in order for the user groups to continue to get that funding. And so that's our staff. And then the organizations would then have to, what we're saying is they have to adhere to those same standards. And that just, I don't understand some of those groups and whether they could adhere to those same standards. And that's my only question. Councillor Parslow?
Yes, just reflecting on Councillor Schumann's question. For me, the issue was spawned by some things I heard concerning the new electronic sign at the Encana Event Centre. And questions were local businesses, did they have the opportunity, sign businesses, to compete, to enter into that? So that spawned my dialogue, and that is why our CAO sent out that email concerning the internal policy, which I mistook to be part of a contract, but so that's how it started for me. And I don't think I was the only councillor who heard about it. So that's just trying to support local business where we can. Is it a fair, level playing field, or is it such a specialised piece that there's no local businesses in the sign business capable of doing that? So that's the question I would need some assurance of.
Councillor Rogers, and then I'll get back to Duncan.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is transparency, accountability, cost-effective, competitive, and I believe that there is a way around all of this, and that would be to tighten up the language on all of our lease agreements, because after reading our lease agreements that we have with other service providers in city facilities, even whether it being not-for-profit, mainly is what I was looking at. I did notice that it is kind of, the language is pretty loose regarding if it were to go out for a bid or something like that. And I think that those groups that are operating city facilities should adhere by a competitive bidding process for certain amounts and stuff like that, which goes back to our city policy that's already in place. So I would say if there's a way of tightening up the language around lease agreements, I think that's a good way moving forward.
Duncan?
So through your worship, I do want to clarify, Councillor Javakov mentioned, we do have contractors we like to use. Staff are following the purchasing policy. There's some exclusions in there where, emergencies, we need to contact somebody to get that work done right away. But other than that, staff are following this purchasing policy, and council sees that through the reports or through the committee of the whole and the awarding of those contracts. As far as that lease agreement and that competitive bidding, if council would like, we can include this in Brenda's report. In a broad sense is where we're looking at right now, unless council gives us other direction. But competitive bidding is something that the city is interested and needs to ensure happens, and that contractors will need to secure pricing, ensure they're getting the best price. I wouldn't, as Shelley said, move to the city system because that is a complicated system and it is onerous. But we can include competitive bidding.
But this motion is moving that we implement the same standard as specified in our purchasing policy to any group that receives funding from the city.
Yeah.
Councillor Javakov, and then Councillor Schum.
I guess the only other point I'd make is that most things where we're sponsoring organizations to do work are under 15,000. So it's a matter of getting verbal or written quotes. I mean, that's not cumbersome. Even under the policy, I don't think that's cumbersome.
Duncan?
So through your worship, no, quotes is something that we can do. Some of the projects have been larger. At the Splash Park, I think our contribution was $100,000, I think, for that particular project. And the RV washrooms, I think we're also somewhere up there as well.
So just to continue on, I think for those small items, they're not complicated. But when you're spending $100,000, I think there's some importance on spending it wisely. The other thing that happens with the organizations like the Mile Zero Park Society is you may be spending $100,000, but there could be another $100,000 that's being donated. That's all part of that project. So these things, I mean, if you're going to get in there, and like Shelley suggests, we get an auditor from the city to go and sit with them and do all of this extra work, which I don't think is necessary. You know, I think if you provide this policy to organizations, I think it'll be fairly straightforward, but there's other aspects to it. If you're, you know, an organization like the Mile Zero Park Society doesn't survive on the revenue they get alone. There's a lot of donations and a lot of volunteer work and that type of thing. So I think if the intent is, the intent of this motion is you know, transmitted to these organizations, I don't see it as a problem. I just think it's a good way for them to realize that we are concerned about how they spend city money.
And I certainly don't disagree with that. I think it is this, but on the comment about if the splash park was 100 and they raised 100 in donations, I don't think it's, so to me, if any expenditure we give to an organization, and I'll use the art gallery, if we give the art gallery $15,000 a year and somebody bequeathed them $1 million and they wanted to do a bunch of work on it, they would be, whether the project, if it's over 15 grand or 75 grand, they have to adhere to our purchasing policy, whether we're giving them 15 grand or whatever the number is. And that's the piece to me I don't understand enough about layering on. We're saying as part of our policy, our purchasing policy, in order for you to get any money from us at all as a city, you have to adhere to our purchasing policy, and somebody then, and we're passing that as a policy, so somebody in administration has to follow that to make sure that they do it. Otherwise, they don't get the dough the next time around. And they have to adhere to the purchasing policy because we're giving them money. And the SPCA now, as an example, I think about, we give them 400 grand in the value of the property. They got a $3 million project. When we pass this, they have to adhere to that policy of purchasing in order to do that project. And if they don't, then I'm assuming we don't give them the land. I don't know, and that's kind of what, and it's as soon as we pass the motion that we're saying you have to adhere to this policy when you receive any money from us, any expenditures, then that's where the clunkiness to me comes in. Go ahead.
It's just, this applies to money that we provide. I don't see the land as being money. That's a donation. That's an incentive for them to build here. And I don't think we're giving them any money. So,
well,
like I say, we can complicate it, but
we do give them 140 grand a year to administer our contract.
Yeah.
That's operational.
But it says all expenditures, including money. I'm just asking the question because these guys, once we pass the policy, these guys then have to administer it, and they're the ones that then have to adhere to it. So I just want to understand that component of it.
Yeah, well, the intent of my motion is for money that we provide. So if we gave Mile Zero Park Society $100,000 for a splash park, I don't think they should just take the first guy that comes along and say, yeah, go ahead, we got 100,000, so build us a splash park. You know, there should be a process there to ensure that we're getting the best deal.
I don't disagree. Councillor Schumann?
Yeah, I think that putting our purchasing policy onto our little not-for-profits in this city would be onerous, and I think I'm going to vote against this, and I'm much more in favor of adjusting our leases to include some wording without going through all the processes of, because I agree with Shelley, we would have to do a bunch of consultation, and I think that the easiest way would just be to amend those leases to include, you know, a paragraph on purchasing and what our expectations are.
Councillor Rogers?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Schumann. We do need to tighten up our language on lease agreements. So I'm just wondering, because I'm sitting here trying to figure out how can we actually do that at this meeting right now, so that we you know, have it included in Brenda's report, that they tighten up the language on lease agreements, that they go by the city's policy.
Well,
Is there?
that's not even,
Councillor Schumann, then Councillor Wilbur, then Councillor Schumann.
Yeah, much as I would like to, I can't support this. Like, I look at maybe contracts that we have where within that contract, it's specified around certain things that they're going to do or provide. And so, yes, maybe we're providing some funding towards it, but we've put it on whoever that contract is with to look after that matter. And I just see, I think of so many not-for-profit groups that do service for us, and then if we put this on them, we're really just creating work for our staff to come back. I mean, I think there's a way to lightly say this is good practice, but I think when you look, there's a difference between our not-for-profit groups and service they provide where compared to a major contract. And I just think if within that contract, this is the agreement and we've said this is what we're going to do, then it's the onus is then on the person on the other side of that contract to compare apples to apples or oranges to oranges. It's also up to local businesses to market themselves. So I think we're stepping in muddy waters. I really don't want to download on our not-for-profit groups because I can think of, and probably all of them, but a good portion of them aren't going to be capable of doing this. So it's going to be our staff take them away from the other work they're doing to do this for them. So I don't know. I just have a knot in my stomach, and I can't support this. I'm sorry.
Councillor Rogers, then Shelley.
Yeah, I just.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Councillor Schumann was next, and then it was Councillor Rogers.
He got the eyes.
Sorry. You did have your
Now
hand
I'm going
up.
to forget what I had.
so, like when I was speaking before about tightening up the wording within our lease agreements, when we look at those through Brenda's work, I don't believe that I want to say in there, you must follow, because that's the same as just saying yes to this motion. I mean, yes, we want some, we want you to be looking to competitive bids. We want you to be getting the best dollar, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't want in the wording in that paragraph that I talked about for it to be, you must follow the city, because I think that's the onerous part. And so if we could just have it included in there that we want to have competitive bids, we want them to be spending our money as well as they can, I think that's good. I don't want that sentence to be, you must follow the city's very onerous purchasing policy.
Or the word guideline. Like, well, use the city's guideline.
As
for-
a guide.
as a guide, as a
And
guide.
that works for me.
Did you want to speak? Or did you do
Just
that?
did.
Okay, Shelley?
Through your worship, there's a couple things that maybe will help you with the decision. So each not-for-profit that we give money to, the people that run those organizations are accountable to a board, and they report out. And if there was any, unforeseen or things that were going awry, they have the responsibility in their organization to adhere to that. Also, very often not-for-profits have their own audit. They have their own review engagements, and annually they have to report out. So I don't think we need to go in there and tell them what they need to do. They already have their structure and their society set up and their systems. The other thing is that council has already given us direction on updating the leases, and they have also given direction on the fee for service and the grants policy update, which we've just had on hold because we're doing year-end and budget. So if council's statements or intent is to have broad-based statements on not so much competitive bidding but value for money, and we can give them some guidelines or attach some things, but that's different than putting conditions on the money given. So there's just...
And I completely in support of the motion up to that, where they must adhere to the same standards as specified in the purchasing policy, because that's the clunkiness that'll come for our staff who have to administer and monitor it, and for the organizations. But I like the idea of saying, you know what, I want to see, I think it's prudent of us to say it has to spell out someplace in the lease agreement or a fee for service or someplace where it says we expect you to have quotes for jobs up to this amount or competitive bids for this amount. Councillor Javetkov, then Rogers.
So, if I made an amendment, can I make an amendment then to the motion?
Yeah.
So if I removed the last part of the motion and said something like, I move that all expenditures, including money that is committed to supplement second-party purchases, something to the effect that or that the above process, which is the 2 verbal quotes, 3 written quotes, competitive bidding and competitive bidding, that a similar criteria are considered for these expenditures, as opposed to having the whole purchasing policy?
Or is it
Are
the
expected
Or just they
to
suggested
use our policy
guidelines
as a
that city
guideline?
currently
Or a
policy
guideline,
has.
yeah.
Can we-
To use this information as a guideline?
All right. Making that by way of an amendment. Seconded? Councillor Rogers. Discussion on the amendment? Clear on the amendment? Go ahead, Councillor
Well,
Parker.
I really think there's a need. I mean, I'm not challenging my fellow councillor members, but how many of you know exactly what standard was applied for the splash park? How many of you know what standard applied to the paving of the parking lot at the Dawson Creek Golf Club? As examples, I can go on and on. I know some of them, I don't know others, and I just think we, our stewardship to the public, we need to have some framework. And this would be a framework I could live with.
Councillor Rogers and then Schumann.
No,
Councillor Schumann, go ahead.
I'm just, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of these not-for-profits, and I can't see them just, oh, they've got $50,000 to do a project, so they don't, like, I can't see the situation where they're not
I'll have a
going
conversation
out.
with them. Have a conversation. I sit there.
I think that I'm in favor of using our very onerous purchasing policy as a guideline for our not-for-profits and not putting it on them specifically. I don't think, I don't feel like they're just running around.
I think that's what the motion was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
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 The amendment, yeah.
The amendment.
Amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment, Councillor Wilbur?
No, I agree. I'm happy. I can support it with the amendment because I think really we don't want to be onerous to our groups, but we want to offer them some sort of guideline to look at, and maybe they haven't thought of it before. So we're not saying do it this way. We're saying, but this is how we do it, so we know it works.
Okay, thank you. We're going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And on the main motion, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. As amended.
As a
Thank you. So now, Councillor Javetkov, 2.3, we have a memo in regards to encroachment.
So I'll read this one out as well. And this is, well, I'll read it out first and then talk about it. Whereas the auction mart has encroached onto the 4th Street right-of-way, I move that administration implement a process to ensure that the structure in trespass is removed before the property can change ownership.
Thank you. Seconded? Councillor Wilbur, discussion? Duncan, can you speak to this in terms of the legality?
Sure. Through your worship, I'll ask Kevin maybe talk a little bit about the history on this one.
So through your worship, well, history. So the 4th Street right-of-way that travels from 116 heading north is really only a half-load right-of-way. It was obviously there for some future possible road. Obviously, that never occurred. At some point, when the auction mart was redeveloped with the current stalls and everything that's in there, the pens, they were built out into what is part of that 4th Street right-of-way. So moving forward, I do not believe that the city can in any way prohibit the sale of that property, but we can put a notice on title that there is an encroachment, and we could work with the owner to see if they would remove the encroachment. But I don't believe we can actually stop the sale.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden?
So what's encroaching, the barns or just the pens? Or both?
So through your worship, this is on the west side of the auction mart property, and it would be between the trail and the stalls or the holding pens, and it would be that area that's encroaching into what would be 4th Street. So 4th Street would actually be on the east side of the walking trail, on the west side of the auction mart.
And the pens are, I believe it's got concrete or asphalt floors in there, so it's not maybe as simple as just moving a few pens. There would be some work involved.
Councillor Javeco?
Yeah. From my recollection, when we looked at it years ago, we were talking about extending the trail from behind the mall out to the Encana Center for kids to ride their bikes on and that. The pens from the auction mart actually were out on the right-of-way and prevented the, an easy access for the walking trail. So that was what it is, and it's a matter of removing some of the metal pens and then cutting the cement and removing it. And it's basically, it's another trespass onto Crown, or on, not Crown land, but city land.
And so our motion that we put a notice on title is what administration are indicating we have the ability to do. But what I heard Kevin say is that we can't enforce the removal of those structures on the sale.
Well, through your worship, sorry, we cannot prohibit the sale. We can certainly work with the owner in the removal of those structures.
Okay, all right, good. Good. So Councillor Rogers and Councillor Javeco?
Yeah, I just think that it should be on title, because if somebody does come in to purchase that property, at least that they'll know that there's some encroachment going on. And then you never know, through the OCP planning and stuff like that, that Dawson Creek Trail might get extended through that to the Encana.
Councillor Javeco?
Yeah, that's, like, surely we must have a system where we can force the issue. We didn't force it with Connie, because, it's kind of in-house, but I mean, if a private enterprise purchases the auction mart, I think it's appropriate to have it corrected.
Okay. Councillor Schumann?
So did you want to amend it then to, considering staff's advice that we really can't do anything with regards to,
Well, I think the motion says implement process, and so administration have indicated that process will be they'll put a notice on title.
Yep.
And then if the sale ever proceeds, then we work with the new owner to ensure that those encroachment infrastructure are removed.
I was just looking at remove before the property can change ownership. It kind of says that this has to be done before they can sell it or something.
It does.
So that's all right.
Administration will work with the process in terms of what we can and can't do and bring that back to us. Councillor Wilbur?
Well, yeah, that was kind of the part that I was thinking, well, but I get what you're saying, staff will word it, figure something else, but because the other reason that I support it is because seeing what we're dealing with in our parks, where people purchased homes later and then said, well, I didn't know it was there when I purchased it, we prevent that from happening, because I just think we're at that time of rules are the rules, so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ready for the question, all in favor? Opposed, carried, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Javekoff.
I have some.
Now, Councillor Business, Councillor Parslow, then Councillor Wilbur, then Councillor Schumann.
So I've been approached, if that's the right word, I'm not sure it is, but contacted by the Historical Society, who are mightily upset. And so they wanted me to convey that they are very upset about the planned placement of this punk art project, which is part of the 75th celebration of the Alaska Highway, in front of the museum building. They tell me they worked for years to get the comboose moved away. I'm using, this is not their word, but this is the sentiment. It desecrates the whole feeling of the museum, obstructs views, destroys flower beds, and they do not want it located in front of the museum. I have assured them that the council approved its placement at the NAR Park, but did not specify a particular location. I know that staff is working hard to work with the Historical Society and the South Peace Arts Society over a suitable location. I would like us, I would not like us, I would like it if I could wave a magic wand and somehow have the intervention of divine forces so that we could lift the Combus to the Mile Zero Park site where it is destined to go in time for the punk art, which I'm all in favor of, being placed where the Combus was, and that would save Duncan and staff a lot of heartache. It's all a matter of timing to find a win-win. So I know staff's working hard at this, but some things are impossible sometimes. So I've done my duty, I've brought it to you. I understand and empathize with the Historical Society, very much so. One of the impediments is that the South Peace Society, Art Society has in its plans the eventual building of a teaching facility to attach to the present art gallery that would be designed so it would fit. But where they want it is a great location for this piece of punk art. So I just said I'd bring it to your attention so you're aware, and we will continue to facilitate some dialogue and hopefully come up with some win-win solution.
So the direction of council was that we would position that public art at the NAR Park and that they would work with administration to find a suitable location for that. So it's not going down there.
No, it's going, sorry, the Combus is going down there.
I thought you had said that they were concerned it was going down there.
No. Sorry for the confusion. The piece of art, one of the proposed place for it is right in front of the museum. They don't want it in front of the museum.
Good.
The ideal solution is for it to go maybe where the Combus is, but it's all a matter of timing.
Sure. Duncan?
So through your worship, maybe a good opportunity to provide a bit of an update of where we are in the areas that have been looked at. And I'll ask Barry or Levi to provide that update. Barry.
I'm going to allow Levi because he's in a training position. So
sure.
He's done some work, but Levi's no, very good for Levi. Explain.
Last week we were working with the Historical Society, looking at different locations around the NAR Park, and so there was a few larger locations there that we thought we should have a look at to see what utilities might be underneath. So we found that on the east side of the property, the far east side along 8th Street, there are utilities under there. There's also utilities in between the museum and the art gallery. And so the two locations that we see where it could possibly go would be just in front of the museum or just east of the art gallery.
Which is where the Combus is.
Is this artwork not a museum? Is it not like a historical?
It's an art piece.
It's an art piece.
It's a South Peace Art Society.
But the South Peace Art Society are commissioning it. Duncan?
Sorry, through your worship, if we were gonna go where the Combus is, I believe if we were gonna put it on the grass portion, we'd be within that CN right away. I think it's 20 feet from the center of the track, something along those lines. Directly east of the art gallery is one area that was looked at where there was that hope for that future expansion from the group at some point. There's also a French drain system that runs through that area that gathers and collects water from the back of the building. So the location right now that has been looked at, all of the property in front of the museum actually is pretty good. It doesn't have any utilities. The location that's been looked at right now and where we've been moving forward is the most southeast of that property in front of the museum. Southeast corner, be right next to the art gallery parking lot. Be out of the way of snow removal for the most part. It's away from utilities. It seems like a good area. Really, the only two areas are either in front of the museum or immediately east of the art gallery itself, and that area isn't great.
So administration will work with the various folks that are involved in it. They'll bring back those recommendations to council, because council had asked them, that's the direction. We said administration will work with them to find the most suitable location and bring that back to council. I'm assuming administration will work with all of the folks down there to ensure that the input is given and provided, and we find that and make that decision on it. Duncan?
So through your worship, we were directed just to work with the group and install it. We didn't have intention to bring it back to council. We were working through the process now, and I think Barry had something he wanted to add there. Go ahead, Barry.
Through your worship, so in order to allow those needs or requests of the Historical Society, I've spoken to Donna, and Donna will meet and bring a final report back to council at the end of May. There will be, decisions will in the end have to be made, but they'll at least have addressed the two site locations that Historical Society might have made, and she'll bring a report for your approval.
Thank you. Did you want to have one more?
I just have a quick question. I don't know if staff knows off the top of their head, but could you remind me how old this trencher is?
Well, it was used in building of the Alaska Highway, so it was 75 years old
So it's
minimum.
kind of historical. Okay.
It's kind of
Thank you.
museum-ish.
Thank
Oh,
you.
but it's been transformed into a
Did
piece
you have
of
something you wanted to add?
On this topic?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Councillor Parslow. Councillor Wilbur. We're on
I'll be
councillor
quick.
business
I will
still.
be quick. I just want to say congrats to Councillor Schumann for being reelected as Director at Large for NCLGA. So I know she's going to bring her great wisdom and flair to the board, and I look forward to working with her. So congratulations. But I also want to thank Lindsay Borick of Platinum Elite Event Planning, who came to Terrace and just kind of oversaw everything with staff, did a fabulous job. And we're very lucky to have her, not only here at the City Hall, but in Dawson Creek. And also to Shireen for Flowers by Shireen, who also traveled all the way to Terrace to dress the tables in the room and change them over for events. And she's one of our local love businesses, so plug for her. And then Tiger Printers, who did all our printing. So it goes to show what big shoes we left to fill when we hosted last year, that we had to bring in some of our resources to help out, which was great that we could. And I just want to thank those local people for doing that. That was quite a ways to travel to help NCLGA out, so I'm really thankful that they did.
Thank you, and our congratulations to the president-elect of the North Central Local Government Association, Councillor Wilbur, who will be the president of the association for 2017-18, and our congratulations, our thanks for stepping up and representing the city on behalf of a terrific regional role, and our congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
That was what I was going
Councillor Schumann, do you have anything you'd like to add?
He's speeding it up, but thank you.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay, well, you can say it.
Yes, congratulations to Shaylee for becoming our president at NCLGA, and it just goes to show having these events in our own city, showing off all our great businesses and services that are available here, can get them the extra business out of town.
No. Thank you.
So.
Any other councillor business? Councillor Javetkov. I'm almost hesitant
You're
to
done.
ask you.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
Did we
you
bring
have
lunch
three
in?
already.
Okay, this isn't a motion. I just, I guess I should comment on Bear Mountain Ski Hill, although it's not in the city, but it's a pretty important amenity to our area. We were successful in getting an NDIT grant of $30,000 for an upgrade to the chalet.
Okay.
And we're also successful in getting a contribution of $72,000 from the regional district to replace the snowmaking water line up there.
Good.
The water line replacement is a $340,000 project, and we, through a lot of donations and community support, are able to get it completed I hope. Keep my fingers crossed, but for $72,000. So that's...
Is that adhering to our
I was gonna
policy?
say.
That's good, good use of...
For that, though, I'm sure.
We're all thinking it.
So
And-
that's thanks to the regional district, Dan Rose and Leonard Hebert.
No.
And the commitment from Triple J Pipelines, as well as numerous equipment owners and volunteers, and it's basically represents $270,000 of in-kind work and volunteer support.
Great job. Thank you. Any other councillor business? Break for lunch?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Now to
Minutes of our regular meeting of council of April 24th for adoption. Councillor McFadden, Councillor Rogers. Any errors or omissions in the minutes? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Any business arising out of the minutes? Correspondence, we have a letter from Ross Harcourt from the Lobster Fest Committee and the South Peace Oilmen's Association, request for auction item or financial donation.
So you want me to
Councillor
leave,
Rogers?
or-
Receive for information.
Seconded. Councillor Parslow. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Letter from Arlene Delosky from Remax in regards to request to the Kembork Aquatic Center for her dog drive-in movie fundraiser. Councillor McFadden, Councillor Schumann. Discussion.
we were gonna say that.
Duncan?
Through your worship, so this is the same weekend as the Métis Nation AGM. We believe we can make it work. We'll just have to work a little closer with those two groups.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Letter from Pauline Castleman, event coordinator for the South Peace Community Arts Council regarding the sponsorship request for their 35th annual regional juried art exhibit. Councillor Parslow?
I move that we sponsor the reception as per their request.
Seconded? Councillor, do you have a seconder? Councillor Schumann. Discussion. Councillor Parslow?
This is probably the biggest art festival in the region. It draws people here from as far north as Fort Nelson and west to Chetwynd, etc. A lot of people come, a lot of people stay here, so it's a big event, and I think it's appropriate that we walk alongside the other two major sponsors and help showcase our city.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
Unfortunately, I won't be able to support this. We just took money away from the Mile Zero Cruisers, the exhibition. Like we said, no new, more. So it's a great thing, but considering what we've done already, I'm so sorry I can't support this.
Thank you. Shelley, this would come out of our grants and
How much?
500.
to community organizations?
$500.
And
Doesn't matter.
did we have a budgeted amount for that this year?
Yeah, through your worship. So the budget for this year is $25,000. So it would come out of that.
Thank you. Councillor Schumann?
We've got $25,000 to spend on sponsorship. This is a very worthy event to put $500 towards, and that's why I seconded it.
Further discussion? I also, I'm going to support it. I think it's important for us to, we did budget this year for, we didn't come to a stop. We had made some hard decisions, but we did include that in the budget. We have approved that grant for community organizations for a purpose. And I think, again, it's an important event for the community. Councillor Rogers, you had your hand up? No. Councillor Javekov?
So I'm just wondering how much money we've already given to the Arts Council and the Art Gallery and that. It seems to me that this is about the third or fourth request, isn't it?
This is the South Peace Arts Council. I don't think it's the Dawson Creek Art Gallery. Councillor Parslow?
Oh, well, we give a fee for service for the operation of support the operation of the gallery, and we have that $15,000 that is given to the South Peace Arts Society, which disperses it to support the Arts Council. Thank you, Council. The Arts Council that supports various groups such as potters and weavers and so on. And that's the limit as far as I understand.
And they're two different.
So Councillor Rogers and Councillor Javetkov?
So I'm under the understanding that if a sports group was hosting a hockey tournament or something like that and came to the city, they would, we would give them $500
If they came and
whatever.
asked
Like
us.
I don't know. I just go that 25 grand that we have. Well, let's reduce that down to 5,000 or something like that. I just think that that's too much.
Next year.
Every time we just start giving, we just keep giving money out, and I just going, but it's not fair for everybody else. It's you try and find a balance, I guess, and that's what I struggle with. Is there doesn't seem to be any balance. There doesn't seem to be a continuity that, because we'll deny it to sports teams, we'll deny it to them, but yet they're bringing in people from all over the place too. So anyway, just me.
Thank you. Councillor Javetkov, then Councillor Schumann.
Yeah, I'll vote against it too. I mean, if we're giving them $15,000 and they just in turn give $1,000 grants out to different organizations, I think they can use some of the money that they're already getting.
Councillor Schumann.
Yeah, so we have $25,000 in our little fund there for sponsorships. We put that out. We say we've got $25,000. Bring your request to us. I don't know what you're talking about, as in it's not fair. Everybody gets to come before council and ask for it. We get a little something in return for this, and I don't even know what you're talking about. We're saying no to this person and that person. So I'm voting for this, and $500 out of a $25,000 budget, it's worthy.
Councillor Parslow.
Yes, I mean, I could support there not being any money in grants, right, as we deal with our budget, but the fact is that we do have it, and they are following the process, as Councillor Schumann's outlined. If it's the will of council not to, then I suggest we amend our budget and delete it as a line item. But while it's there, the public know about it, they apply, they follow the process. As you have said, Mayor, this is the biggest art event, and in our official community plan, we state that we wish to be the art centre of the peace, so this is all encompassed in that. So I'm not disagreeing with Councillor Wilbur, what she said, or Councillor Rogers around having it, but we have it, and this is a very worthy cause. And we'll entertain other worthy causes, presumably, if we keep that $25,000 in our budget, which is what I think that's where we're at right now.
Thank you. Further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Delegations were through. Reports. Report 17063 from the city planner regarding our temporary use application for 2041-2101 Alaska Avenue. Councillor Parslow.
I move that report number 17063 from the city planner, temporary use permit 17-01 for 2041 and 2101 Alaska Avenue be received. Further, the temporary use permit number 17-01 be approved for a 12-month period.
Seconded, Councillor Schumann. Discussion? Duncan?
So through your worship, staff are recommending the report. However, I would request permission to add an item to close to discuss some of the elements of the TUP.
Sure, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 17065 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding the 2016 draft financial statements. Councillor Parslow.
Move the report 17065 from the Chief Financial Officer, 2016 draft financial statements be received. Further, that Council receive and approve the 2016 draft financial statements and the 2016 reserve transfer schedule as presented. And further, that the audited financial statements be brought forward to be formally approved at the special council meeting on May the 10th, 2017.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Wilbur. Discussion? Shelley, you have any comments?
Yes and no. So yes, it's bringing the financial statements to council on an annual basis is basically a standard operating procedure. We have to bring the draft to the board so that essentially you take responsibility for the financial position of the city of Dawson Creek, and then the auditor will come on Wednesday and actually give the auditor's report. I encourage you all to actually look at the financial statements. They are at December 31st, which is a point in time, but there was a lot of good information in there. The position is solid. There was a lot of movement on the reducing the debt. The net position improved, and there was a lot of transactions through the statement of revenue and expenditures, and there's lots of information in the notes. So do take time to look at it, because we are progressing in a positive direction, and it's a good position to be in. So yeah.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to thank the finance team. They did a lot of work on this to help us out through the cycle, and it's great to have it completed well. Thank you.
you, Shelley. Great job, as usual, getting it done and completed for us and moving it forward. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 7.3, we have report 17066 from the city planner regarding the development permit application for Reg Norman Trucking. Councillor Javetkoff.
The report number 17-066 from the city planner, development permit application 17-03 at 9809 17th Street be received. Further, that the replacement of the current warehouse on 9809 17th Street be approved in principle. Further, that staff be directed to proceed with the required 10-day notification period, and further, that issuance of the permit be subject to receipt of financial security in the amount of 125% of the value of landscaping, including hard surfacing.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Wilbur. Discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Javetkoff.
I'd just like to make a further, I was going to include it in this, but it might create another half an hour of discussion, but I'd like to include a motion with regard to this application that we do not charge development cost charges on this development, because it does not increase the pressure on the system.
Thank you. Seconded?
No.
What?
No.
Seconded, Councillor Rogers. Discussion. Councillor Wilbur and Councillor Schumann.
I read distinctly under the summary that it's a proposal to build a new office building to replace the existing one, not renovate the existing building.
Councillor Schumann and then Duncan. Duncan?
Through your worship, I believe there are some specific exemptions in the Local Government Act for DCCs, but once you implement a DCC, you have to charge it. It's also a bylaw, so I believe the only way council could
waive the DCC?
Waive per se would be to provide that funding, Shelley, or can you clarify? I don't think it's lawful.
Yeah, through your worship, it's not lawful. Once the bylaw is established and approved by council, that's law.
Okay.
So it's not council's position to actually say the bylaw applies or the bylaw doesn't apply.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So just for purposes of the motion isn't valid because the bylaw overrides and supersedes the motion. Councillor Javetkoff.
So I'll withdraw the motion, but just some clarification. So in the bylaw, there is a provision for the proponent to prove that he isn't adding additional pressure on the water system. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we could ask Neil to prove that he's not adding additional pressure on the water system, and that will negate the need for a development cost charge.
So correct, through your worship, we would ask for a third-party engineer to confirm that.
Okay.
Do you need a hammock remover?
So
is that, just to clarify, is that a condition of that you would have a third-party engineer confirm it? Is that a provision of the bylaw, or is that just a personal requirement?
A personal. So through your worship, I try not to apply my personal opinion to the Local Government Act or the bylaws. Generally, when we're asking for assurance, whether it be a letter of assurance or some kind of guarantee, we don't generally go back to the developer and say, hey, do you think this is going to increase usage? Generally, we try for some kind of third-party assurance if it's not an engineer, if he has, and maybe even lean to Kevin to ask any of the history on this, or if there is a practice, but.
No, through your worship, that's exactly right. I'm afraid is that if we're going to sit down with a developer and argue whether there's a burden on the system, and we're just going to take their word for it most of the time, we're going to lose every time. So there's things through the plumbing code that we can do. There's work we can do, but having something from a mechanical engineer, third-party engineer that's going to prove that out is essentially would not argue that.
Councillor Javetkov and Councillor Rogers and Councillor.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
Okay. Councillor Rogers?
I just can't believe some of the things that I hear once in a while. We're talking about bringing in a third-party engineer to say, yeah, there's a toilet in that building and there's a toilet in that building, and I just don't get it. Like, we got a building inspector, and I think the people that are building the place are pretty reasonable. I think the city people are pretty reasonable, and if Neil came in and said, look at you guys, we got the same amount of toilets that are in this shed or in this new building, and I can't really see us putting any more pressure on your infrastructure. I think we got some pretty smart people here that say, yeah, you know what, you're right, but we're still going to bring in a third-party engineer. To me, that just doesn't make any sense. And maybe this is one of the reasons why I don't like government so much.
Well, it's a democracy, so you get to choose that, right?
I just going,
so you can
holy
get to
cow.
go live off the grid and don't participate.
Let's put some more bureaucracy on this, yeah.
Councillor Parslow?
Yes, our Chief Financial Officer, in my view, correctly told Councillor Javetkov that there's no, it's there or it's not there, right? It's implemented or it's not implemented. But administration within that bylaw has some discretionary power, and it's the exercise of that discretionary power that I think generates some of the issues. And it's all to do, I believe, with the refurbishing, renewal of existing buildings, that the discretionary powers there, correct?
Yes, through your worship, we've exercised that discretionary opportunity in buildings that are very clear, maybe don't actually have a water line that ties in, they're waterless. And we've said, okay, I don't think we need a third party to verify that. But in most cases, and Kevin, I'll lean on Kevin again, but in most cases, we lean on the onus on the building owner to provide that information.
Your worship, that's correct. We've only exempted one property that I know of to date, and that was the former Green Smart property. And that was due to verification of.
So,
I can't remember.
so we don't have a motion, but I want to kind of had administration give us some feedback, and the DCCs apply. And Shelley?
Yeah, through your worship. So I just have to say this, right? We have a bylaw. It's law. You pay your professional staff to administer the bylaw, and that's what they do. And they work with the business people and the residents in the community to apply the bylaw. And I don't think we have to question every transaction that comes up.
I don't either.
So you look like you had one more thing you
Oh,
wanted.
no, I was anticipating moving on to the
Okay,
next
all right,
item on
good.
the agenda. Sorry.
7.4, report number 17068 from the Director of Corporate Administration regarding our recognition awards policy update. Councillor Schumann.
I move report number 17068 from the Director of Corporate Administration regarding the recognition awards policy update be received. Further, that the proposed revision to the recognition awards policy be approved pending the required 30-day review, which will clarify that recognition of individuals is intended for significant contributions to the community outside of the parameters of paid employment.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Parslow, discussion? Councillor Parslow?
I really like the amendments here, especially that outside the realm of paid employment, that will certainly be a good sifter for when things are not, when submissions are okay or not, because we can get into a lot of difficulty with that. So it's good improvement.
Thank you. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 7.5, we have report number 17069 from the Director of Development Services regarding our OCP RFP update. Councillor Wilbur?
I'll move that report number 17-069 from the Director of Development Services regarding the RFP 2017-07 OCP review and update project completion results be received. Further, that council award the RFP 2017-07 OCP review and update project completion review to Urban Systems Limited for $85,568 plus applicable taxes.
Who seconded? Councillor Schumann, discussion? Councillor Javetkoff?
Just a question. In this process, now that we're farming it out, and I don't remember if this was an official motion or if it was just idle discussion in council, so I don't know if it's adopted, but we talked about costing out some of the items that are presented for the OCP.
Oh, yeah.
And I just wondered what provisions there are for including that in when there's a third party doing the OCP. Now, you know, costing them out, I mean, because people can come up with all kinds of, you know, changes and additions to the community, but there should be an analysis on the cost, you know, in that discussion process.
Duncan?
Through your worship, I'll ask Kevin to talk about the RFP process.
So through your worship, just for clarity, you're talking about, we go through the OCP process, members of the community talk about some new amenities, whatever that might be. You're thinking through that process, you'd like to have a cost attached to those wants and desires, just so I'm clear about that. So through the process, I think we would have an ability to come up with some high-level costing. You know, all the consultants that submit have a fairly large team that they work with, and I know particularly Urban Systems has somebody that deals specifically with asset management and fiscal gap. So I think we would have the ability to get some numbers attached to some of this, depending on what comes out. I mean, we really don't know what's going to come out of that process.
So, did we pass a motion to that effect? Like, we talked about it, and, you know, I'm a year older, and my memory is...
Duncan?
So through your worship, and I'll go back to Kevin, when we found out that Nigel was going to be unable to complete this project for us, we brought a report to council, and council approved taking it out to RFP. I don't believe the recommendation in that report, and I'm looking at Kevin just if I recall.
Through your worship, I don't recall specifically, but again, through the process, we can have that conversation with the consultant and see if that is onerous, but I think we can work with it.
Yeah.
I don't remember a specific motion of council though, so.
Maybe we'll pull that out just to see if we can find that specific motion or...
You guys remember that we talked about it?
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Councillor Parson?
Just,
Wasn't
yes,
a
you're
dream.
not...
We talk about a lot of stuff.
We're dreaming. It really happened.
Just
Go ahead,
to
sir.
add, we certainly did have that conversation, and to add to that, we were going to have the statement of purpose, the fiscal gap, up front and centre, and that be because we were concerned about some sense of reality.
Yeah.
Anyone can come up with dreams, but how many of them, they've got to be grounded in some level of reality. So the statement of purpose was...
We'll pull that back out and,
Yeah.
and have a look at that just to see, in fact, if we did give specific direction. And then, as I say, now we're a moving target now because of obviously going from in-house to an RFP and all that. Duncan?
Through your worship, another opportunity is as we're moving through this process, council will be involved, and if there's, I mean, we don't know what it looks like just yet, so to cost out every piece of it, there may be certain areas that council's interested in. We might have that opportunity at that time.
Okay, so we'll bring that back. Are you ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 7.6, we have report number 17070 from the Director of Infrastructure regarding the asphalt maintenance program. Councillor Parslow.
The report 17070 from the Director of Infrastructure, we request for quotations 2017-10 asphalt maintenance program be received. Further, that Council award request for quotation 2017-10 asphalt maintenance program to Peters Brothers Construction Limited, with the unit cost provided in the bid form in effect until December the 31st, 2017.
Seconded. Councillor Schumann. Discussion? Councillor Rogers.
Yeah. So the I took 107, divided into it, and it works out to we're going to spend roughly $3,200 on road maintenance per kilometer. I just, through your worship to staff, can I ask, does this comply with the road report recommendations, like that we do this amount of money for our roads? There was a recommendation in that report. I'm just trying to find out if this is the right amount of money that we should be investing.
Yeah, it doesn't, because we spent the $4 million out of our capital is going to that bridge, and so it eliminated the ability to leverage any other further capital into that normal asphalt paving program.
Yeah, but this is maintenance. Was there not a piece in there just about maintenance? I remember them telling us we had to put $3 to $4 million into roads repairs, which we're not doing, but there was a certain amount that we had to put into maintenance.
Duncan?
Yeah, so through your worship, through Sean, maybe if you can talk on that maintenance component.
Through your worship, no, we'd still be short on the maintenance component. Councillor Rogers, as we talked about in the Cal last meeting, the only additional monies that went in for maintenance were through the operational budget in 2016 for patching. You're going to see this here. And a couple of years ago, we increased this patching budget from approximately $100,000 a year up to $204,000 a year, where it is right now. Keep in mind that operationally, a number of patches occur in regards to utilities as well. We do end up charging out some of the patching to water, sewer, for example. So you are going to see a program a little bit beyond that asphalt patching area of $204,000. So. But in regards to the pavement condition assessment report, no.
Thank you. Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor? Sorry.
I'm just getting ready to go.
Oh, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 7.7, we have report 17076 from the Parks and Facilities Manager regarding Dawson Creek Regional Airport Terminal Canopy and Sidewalk. Councillor McFadden.
I'll make the motion that report number 17076 from the Parks and Facilities Manager regarding 2017-08 invitation for bids Dawson Creek Regional Airport Terminal Canopy and Sidewalk be received. Further, that Council award the 2017-08 invitation for bids Dawson Creek Regional Airport Terminal Canopy and Sidewalk to Heggie Construction at the tender price of $150,750. Further, that any overage on the original budget up to $21,000 be made available through the airport general reserve and capital reserve for a total of $167,150 to fund this project.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Wilbur. Discussion? Councillor Rogers?
I just wonder if Councillor Jabekoff is going to support this, seeing as how there was only one bid. I wonder about the rationale with doing the canopy. Sorry.
You're not going to get the opportunity to ask him.
I just wonder about, like,
silly season.
There was talk about extending the runway, and there's talk about if we did extend the runway and more people came, that we would probably have to renovate the terminal building to accommodate all of this extra activity that we were probably get from what I've heard when we extend the runway. So investing more money into that building when it seems to be fine right now, is that really prudent to be spending that? And I know that there is a grant that we're getting, we're leveraging grant money as well, but that was my only thing is are we doing the right thing, or is it just putting a Band-Aid on something? Just my comments.
Thank you. Further questions? Further comments? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item 8, bylaws. Are you still okay if we keep going?
Yeah.
You need a break? Okay. Annual business license and regulation amendment bylaw 4354 for consideration of adoption. Councillor Javetkov? Councillor Wilbur?
I just wondered what bylaw this was. Is this the food trucks?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to make an amendment to it that we exclude the NAR park from the bylaw.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Schumann. Brenda?
That, to specify the locations is outside of the bylaw, so that would,
Separate motion.
that would be a motion.
Separate motion.
Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Duncan?
So, through your worship, one point that I would like to bring forward, and it's mentioned in the notes that Brenda provided in the public consultation piece, is this would increase the fee that's currently $187. That was $187 to all vendors, implemented in 1996, and it would up that to $500 for all vendors, whether they're on private or city property. So, council's aware.
Okay. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the amendment, or the motion now?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we exclude the NAR park from those 4 locations.
Thank you. Seconded by everybody. Any discussion? by McFadden. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 8.2, we have report number 17073 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding our financial plan bylaw number 4355. Councillor Wilbur, Councillor Parslow. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And our tax rates bylaw 4356 for consideration of first 3 readings. Councillor McFadden, Councillor Wilbur. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Mayor's business. So I had the opportunity to tour the Northern Lights College Health Sciences facility last week. No, the week before. And it was at the invitation of Michelle Parkinson, who runs the licensed practical nurse program at the college. And so that program has been ongoing for a bit of time at the college. And last year, I think 2 years ago, they struggled to get 5-6 students enrolled and engaged in the program. This past year, they've had 12 students in. And next year, they've got 24 registered in the program. And so it's really an amazing, if you haven't seen it, you haven't been there, it's a fully functioning lab. It looks like a hospital in there with the hospital beds, the training equipment, the training dummies they have that are actually can simulate real life injuries, illnesses. So to me, it was really educational and informative to go down and see that. And I think that facility also acts as an emergency trauma center if, in fact, the hospital got overrun, and then it can be fully equipped into a fully functioning emergency center, my understanding. But I think the real message was, to me, about the licensed practical nurse program, how successful it's getting. Peace River Regional District, we've got a scholarship program going on now at the PRRD that we put $100,000 into, and starting to fund some of those educational opportunities for health professionals. And so this is just a really good eye-opener to me, and so I just wanted to raise it with council. The weekend before last, we were all there supporting the Kiwanis Home and Garden and Leisure Show, and again, a really good event in the community, and very, very well attended, I thought, on Friday night and Saturday that I was there. It's really good to see folks come into the community and engage in the Home and Garden and Leisure Show, and a real credit to the group of volunteers, those folks that volunteer in the Kiwanis Club, to continue to put that forward, and all the proceeds that they raise as a result of that major fundraiser goes back into the community for children programs. And so I really want to compliment all of the volunteers at the Kiwanis Club, as well as all the other volunteers that were there and helping make the Home and Garden Show such a great success. Last week, prior to going to NCLGA, I attended a session in Vancouver on Tuesday morning. The Independent Contractors and Business Association had an annual industry outlook. and it was a lot of the major industry folks were there from different segments of the province. Forestry, Ming from Wood Fiber was there, the CEO of the port, but also John King, the lead guy for CNN on Power and Politics, kind of that program, and he runs that magic board. And he gave an hour overview of the U.S. politics and the impacts of the U.S. election and all of that and how it's unfolding. It was very, very interesting to hear that perspective from inside there, and it was. I'm really glad I went. I made a couple of really, really good contacts when I was there, and I'm going to be back hopefully down this summer to do some presentations on the natural gas sector to some of these industry folks. Partnerships BC, Peter Kiewit and Sons, a major, major contractor, were at the same table I was, and they really wanted to have some follow-up. So it's really well worth the time to head down for overnight. And Chris Gardner, the president of ICBA, gave me the ticket to attend, and so that helped. I want to congratulate everybody in the North Central Local Government Association annual general meeting last week in Terrace, and Wednesday we attended and I went on a tour up into the Nass Valley and toured the traditional Nisga'a territory and areas, and so interesting to learn about the history of our province and from that perspective. And you see those lava beds in north of Terrace that stretch for miles and miles and miles, and upwards of 2,000, 2,500 Nisga'a people were killed. 400 or 500 or 600, was it even more than that maybe? No, 260 years ago.
260.
Yeah, and they had a huge explosion, volcano, and wiped out about 2,000 or 2,500 Nisga'a people as a result of that tragedy. And so that traditional lava beds are very, very sacred to the Nisga'a people as you're traveling into the Nass Valley and into New Iange as you see that. But just really, really great people. We had a tour of their museum in Greenville, and they're talking about how the development of their communities, and they were doing some excavation work last year or 2 years ago. From the chief administrative officer of Greenville was talking to us about it, and they were doing some road work and some sewer work, I think, or road sewer construction work, and they were excavating in an area, and they dug up these huge bone beds of people that were wiped out by smallpox and population, and the artifacts and the culture that they're finding in their community that go back centuries is really amazing. And so it was just really a good tour, very informative and very educational. The North Central Local Government Association meeting, as we talked about, Councillor Wilbur, now the new president, and Councillor Schumann as the director at large, were well represented in North Central Local Government. And I thought it was a great conference and very well attended, and we have a very good profile on NCLGA and with NCLGA. Any questions? We had the tourism advisory group here today and making a recommendation, and so we need to now move that forward with a motion. Councillor Javetkov?
I've gone over their recommendation, and their recommendation seems to put some emphasis on using nonprofit provider for the tourism function. But I'm just wondering, like, a nonprofit provider will be pretty limited on their scope. Like, what Alaska Highway, or the previous provider there, has been doing, it's fairly technical, a lot of it. I'm just wondering if we should take this opportunity, and well, I guess I'll make a motion, then we can discuss it. Whereas the Tourism Advisory Committee has recommended an RFP from nonprofit organizations to manage the tourism program, I move that administration be requested to advertise an RFP directed at nonprofit organizations to provide management services for 1, the Alaska Highway House, 2, the Visitor Information Center, and 3, the Visitor Magazine, which would be a dual purpose, like it is now, I think, for tourism purposes and economic development purposes. So it's a dual purpose magazine.
Okay, seconded. Councillor Parslow. Discussion. Councillor Javetkov?
So my thinking is that, whereas we had before with Alaska Highway tourism provider, service provider, we had quite a complex plan. What this does is it reduces the scope of tourism and consequently reduces the amount of money that it's going to cost. And it makes it manageable for a nonprofit organization. And I'm thinking of a few nonprofit organizations that could possibly be submitting a proposal. But in light of, our pressures right now as far as fiscal management, this would be an opportunity, I think, and it to a certain extent reflects their recommendation.
Councillor Wilbur?
Yeah, this also puts a knot in my stomach. Looking at what Councillor Javetkov just presented, to me now that's working with possibly three different not-for-profit organizations and dicing it up. And it's been my concern all along, and I didn't even like the direction we were taking, so I'm still standing by that. But tourism is being looked at as one of our resource incomes, and man, I don't think it's ever been broke. I think it needed to be tweaked, and I just really have a knot in my stomach, and I just think that the way we're going, we are going to be shooting ourselves in the foot, but that is just my opinion, and I just want to express it and put it out there. But I know from working with many different avenues of provincial government and just different organizations, tourism is a huge resource industry, and if we start hacking it apart, we're losing some great aspects of what we have to offer in our community and area.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councillor Wilbur? Sorry, Councillor Schumann?
I know you meant me.
Yeah.
I'm voting against Councillor Javetkov's motion. There's nothing in there about the transition period, trying to extend the transition period. I agree with Councillor Wilbur, and I don't think that going out and, we put together this advisory committee. They come to us after hours and hours and hours and meetings and meetings and meetings with a recommendation. And yes, I guess we get to tweak it or whatever we want to do, but I think that Councillor Javetkov is changing that all up. I don't believe that the idea was to cut the funding down. We've already committed to 4 years of that funding, so we were looking for a governance model to oversee that, and so I think that his motion completely changes that, and I will be voting against it in favor of the original recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers?
Okay. That was the recommendation from the committee was to put it out to an RFP, carry in heavier weight to a not-for-profit. And also the transition plan was attached as well. And through the transition plan, there was a lot of 10s. I think there was an 8 and a 4 for those were the low and the high things if we were to transition around September. And there was a lot of talk with the group, okay, with the transition plan, should it not line up with the city's year end? Because I think, I'm not sure, I think the year end for tourism was March or sorry, May? March? I think it was around March. So having everything line up, I think there was a conversation about having the dates and the year end line up, because having it the date for September, which council had said that that's what they wanted to see, what that means is they would have to go in and count everything and take all of the inventory and everything for around September, and then going to their year end, so there'd be another quarter that goes into it. So I'm just giving you guys an update on that. Like that was some of the rationale behind the extension, was to get it to line up with the city's year end, just for ease of implementation and everything else. And as far as a governance model goes, me personally, I looked at it and go, we're getting somebody else to run this. Now, Northern BC Tourism was running tourism in Dawson Creek. So carrying heavier weight for not-for-profit to run Dawson Creek Tourism, meaning can a not-for-profit group in the city of Dawson Creek operate tourism the exact same way that Northern BC Tourism was doing it? I don't think so. To get another professional in there to run Dawson Creek Tourism exactly the way it's being run now, I know that there would be pains and everything else, but if you're going to take over a company and you're going to take over operations of something, there's always going to be some restructuring that has to go on. And what Councillor Javetkov, I believe, was talking about was there needs to be restructuring and tweaking of tourism. Does it need restructuring? Does it need tweaking? My opinion is yeah, everything does. Everything needs to be reset, re-looked at, re-examined. Do I, after sitting on the advisory committee and then going back and working with the community plan, everybody's seeing Rod's binder sitting on his desk. Well, I looked at the corner in my office at home and I'm piled up about this high with everything that we've gone through over the past year. Actually, it's almost 2 years now. So I got a handle on tourism. And after going through all of those meetings and talking with April, you know, I've got a handle on it. Do I know it? Absolutely not. I don't think that anybody in this room knows exactly what the function of tourism does, because the amount of things that they do, and if you go in and if you look at the lists for the transition that April had provided us and stuff like that, that's an indication. You know, it's still not all of it. So yeah, I guess the easy way out would be just read the recommendation from the group. But you know, if somebody wanted to do that, I definitely wouldn't. But what do I value out of tourism in Dawson Creek, and what do I see that it needs? I believe, yes, it needs the Visitor Information Center. I've never heard anybody say anything different. Yes, it needs the Alaska Highway House downtown. I didn't normally think that in the past, but after talking to everybody that is in the downtown sector and that it does bring business in. And do I think we need the magazine? Yes, I believe we need the magazine. And yes, we need to keep applying for the $20,000 grants that fund our Visitor Information Center and any of the other grants that we get from it. But me personally, destination marketing that we work with, do we need to do all the marketing that is going on? And I disagree with that. We have Dawson Creek Tourism already has a website that's in place. You know, you can do all of that marketing in-house. So it's just, for me, it's to keep the same model that we have right now. I don't agree with the same model that we have right now. I believe it needs to be tweaked, and because of our fiscal situation in Dawson Creek, I really do think that at this time it's prudent. If we can, we're getting a new contractor in, so let's figure out exactly what we want to have out of tourism and see if we can reduce the costs.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur, and then Councillor Parsel.
So I've been sitting on the advisory committee for Destination Northern BC. Nobody from this tourism committee's on there. No, I'm the only one from Dawson Creek on there. So I would be very confident in saying, of course nobody knows what they're doing because nobody bothered to get involved and do it. And their 10-year plan is awesome. And I'm absolutely terrified that we're going to become a little blip in that plan and we're not going to be a part of it. the government's investing huge dollars in promoting northeastern BC and doing this whole structured plan and restructuring and making those tweaks. And I'm so scared we're gonna miss the boat. This honestly makes me sick to my stomach to save a few bucks. Like, maybe it's not perfect and maybe it needs to be tweaked, but to just completely tip it upside down and remodel it all, I said it before and I'm saying it again, we're making a mistake.
So council has given direction.
I know, but
and
I'm still just saying it.
Yeah. So council gave direction that we're going to continue with tourism for the next 4 or 5 years, and we instructed to have a tourism advisory committee established for the administration of that plan. Yep. And what was the governance structure now with Northern BC Tourism not overseeing it? How are we going to put a structure in place? We called on a huge number of folks in our community to come and invest in themselves, to learn about tourism and give their input into their proposals of what is going to be the best, from their perspective, the best recommendation for the management of tourism in our community. And they say in the recommendation that a heavier weight be given to not-for-profit organizations, and that somebody from the advisory committee be put on that advisory board. So I'm not in favor of us going back and saying, here's the components of tourism that we're going to be involved in. We've done that. This was about what's the governance structure going to be in terms of how the plan is going to unfold. We invested with residents of our community. We asked them to participate. We asked them to invest of their time, which they have. They've educated, they've spent, they've put their time into it. They've made a recommendation. I think we support that recommendation that our residents and our business community have given to this work on our behalf. Councillor Rogers, Councillor Parslow, Councillor Rogers.
And the group did say that that they would, like, there was, I believe it was in the terms of reference, that there will be a Dawson Creek Tourism Advisory Board set up that would work with, there was talk about it at our last meeting, just meeting quarterly and then working with whoever was running Dawson Creek Tourism, just to make sure that you know, that the citizens were being heard and that other stuff. But through your worship, Councillor Wilbert, I just needed a clarification. You said you sat on the Northern BC Tourism Board?
Advisory committee board that
The
they
advisory
have for
committee board.
Destination BC.
Okay, because there is only one representation from Northern BC Tourism in Northeast BC, and there's only one member, and that's a member from Fort St. John. So I just wanted to say that that board doesn't even represent Northeast BC.
Councillor Parslow?
Yeah. We adopted the 5-year financial plan just recently, and in the plan that we adopted, it says, going forward, strategies for cost reduction will need to be considered with any and all new contracts and commitments. Proactive, I'm just selecting little pieces here. Strategies to compensate for declining revenues must be adopted. The council needs to be proactive and be resilient to changing circumstances. The changing circumstances of the 5 years are nicely encapsulated here. So what I hope we're not going to dig ourselves into a hole and say we did approve this, now we have new information, so we're still going to approve it. As you know, I admire the people working in tourism. I support the resolution, the motion before us, because it aligns with this 5-year summary. And I'm always challenged by the notion of Dawson Creek as being a place to come and have your holidays. So I support it. We're fine-tuning it, and we're looking at opportunities to reduce our expenditures as we face declining revenues. It's an opportunity that presents itself. If it's not this, what else are you going to, what are you going to cut as we move forward?
Any further discussion? Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that in last August, August 22nd, we passed a motion and the motion was, excerpts of it, that the model that is a municipal fee-for-service contract with Northern BC Tourism Association, and that the Northern BC Tourism Association Board would continue to have fiduciary responsibility for Tourism Dawson Creek, and a 5-year contract with Northern BC Tourism Association for the provision of tourism services commencing January 2017 and ending December 2021. And then subsequently, we passed a motion that gave them authority to run the Tourism Dawson Creek until September, this coming September. So basically, that nullifies the previous agreements. Now they're recommending that we incorporate a nonprofit organization.
No, they're saying a heavier weight
committee is-
given to
Heavier
a
weight, yeah.
nonprofit, not
Well-
recommending.
What does that mean?
Well, when they put an RFP out, that a heavier weight will be given to a nonprofit.
So that to me indicates that they would like to see a nonprofit organization operating tourism. Or is that just smoke and mirrors?
Yeah, I can't answer that.
Okay,
They're
well,
saying, I'm reading their
again,
words.
I read these things as they're written. I don't try and, you know, change the interpretation to suit myself. I read what's written there. A stronger,
If you go to the second attachment, sorry to interrupt, is it okay, Your Worship?
Well, I'm just gonna wait till Councilor
Well, I
Jacob's
can-
finished and.
you know, they want a stronger commitment to nonprofit.
Yeah,
That's
heavier
what they
weight
want,
given to a
heavier
nonprofit.
weighting.
Yep.
So anyways, to me, that implies that they would like to see a nonprofit organization operating it. And to me, a nonprofit organization to take on that full realm of responsibilities is unrealistic. So if we identify specifically what we'd like to see, which are those 3 items that I presented in the motion, then it's pretty straightforward for a nonprofit organization to take it on. Otherwise, it's just smoke and mirrors, and really there's another agenda there. So,
Well, that's this council's agenda, and this council voted by majority to continue with the services that we approved. And we asked this advisory committee to invest of their time, people in our community, to invest in their time to come up with a recommendation of what this structure should look like. That's what they've done. I think that's what we asked them to do, and that's what they did. We didn't ask them to come up with an alternative model, and that's not what is in the recommendation. So, Councillor Rogers and Councillor.
Yeah, the group had gone through, like we actually sat there and talked about, okay, what are the different models of how are different tourism destinations, whatever, being managed, operated? What types are there? One was a for-profit. That was the city of Chilliwack. Their tourism is for-profit. So we scored that. And then we looked at the not-for-profit, and we scored that. And then we looked at a corporation doing it, and that was scored as well. And what the group came up with was the scoring, which is actually attached in our package here, that for not-for-profit model for operating tourism, it scored higher because of the grants that you can get and other things. That just the way it went. I had no control over it. That's what the group decided, that it would be not-for-profit, and then the next operating proponent would be a for-profit. And that's all the recommendation is they're saying their recommendation was that you send out an RFP for not-for-profit and for-profit, but carrying a heavier weight to the not-for-profit. Like they did say, it did start out, the very first motion put forward. This was an amended motion that was made by the group. And that was, the first one was not-for-profit, and then after discussion, they added the not-for-profit through an amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Schumann?
Yeah, and so for some of us sitting around the table, all that's important is the visitor center and the Alaska Highway House and this magazine. For others sitting around this table, there are other things within our tourism function that are important. The economic development possibilities, the marketing outside of our region. Destination marketing is important to some of us and is important to some of our businesses and our community members. That's why we saw the pushback from the community when we were scrapping it. And so I think you've changed what there's nothing in there around the transition period. And Ryan sat right there and explained to us why that was important. We didn't want to mess up the summer months, and that September was too soon to feasibly get it done without screwing up the whole season. And I come back to it again. Just because you think that destination marketing is not important doesn't make it so.
Thank you. Further discussion? You ready for the question on the motion? Can we have it back, just the three?
I want to hear it again. The motion.
The Alaska Highway House, Visitor Information Center, and the magazine.
And the magazine would be both community as well as...
Well, and I think it's sort of gravitated to that already, because there's only one magazine out this year.
Yeah. Brenda?
Sorry, just to clarify, was it specifically an RFP for a non-profit?
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Rogers, one last time.
Yeah, I just would like to ask staff, because the motion's kind of vague, to that the transition period. I heard Councillor Schumann say, well, there's nothing in there for a transition period. There's nothing in for a timeline extension or anything like that. I just kind of wondered, does that get covered off through the RFP? Or does it need to be spelled out? Does it?
Duncan?
We could sit here all afternoon and draw up the whole RFP, but I'm not sure.
Brenda?
So through your worship, we would be following council's previous direction and the timelines, which is the fall.
Which is the September. Yeah. Okay. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Fails. Councillor Schumann?
I move that council direct administration to post a request for proposals for the management of tourism in Dawson Creek, with a heavier weight given to not-for-profit organizations. Further, that a tourism advisory committee voting member be included in the scoring and decision-making process for the tender selection, and further that council extend the transition period with preference for December 31st, 2017, and request that Northern BC Tourism extend their contract for that transition period.
Moved, seconded. Councillor Wilbur, discussion. Councillor Rogers?
I just wonder what staff has to say about the for the transition period. What would be a prudent date to line up the fiscal year end? Should it line up with city's fiscal year end, or?
Duncan or Shelley?
Through your worship, looking at the recommendation, I think it covers everything off. You're just extending from September to December. That's easy enough. The caveat is whether Northern BC Tourism will extend theirs, overseeing the contract to December 31st. As you go through the RFP and get all that set up, you'll have the specifics of anything I would expect set out in the RFP.
That'll be the issue. Further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Rebecca Parslow opposed and record. Thank you. We had a late item that came through in an email that I'd asked to be circulated, and it's from the South Peace Motocross Association. And they're looking to make an application to NDIT's Community Halls and Recreation Facilities Grant for the replacement of the motocross tower that got burnt last winter, and they're looking for us to give them a letter of support. And I'd like to ask Council if you're willing to consider that at this late date. Councillor Javekov?
I'll make a motion that we support it.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Schumann. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And that's it for Mayor's business. Diary, Residential Development Committee, Duncan?
So through your worship, you'll notice that we've added homes and suites. That was the discussion at the last meeting, so that's been included underneath the diary.
Thank you. Consent calendar. Strategic priorities.
Your worship, nothing to update.
Thank you. Question and answer period. Media question now. We've got a new member of the media sitting here, and I'd like to welcome you, and I'd ask if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Trent Ernst. I'm formerly the editor over in Tunbridge at the Tunbridge News, which died a slow, painful death. I'm taking over the reporter position here for the Mirror.
Oh, welcome. Welcome. So, any media questions? Marnie or Trent?
Yeah, just a clarification with the development cost charges. Just so I'm clear, if a business is renovating an existing building by law, the cost charges apply to them and there's no exceptions for that?
Duncan?
So through your worship, there are some exemptions. They're indicated through the Local Government Act, places of worship. There's some value. You're only allowed to apply a DCC once unless it's an expansion. So if it's a renovation, it's only once. So there are some exemptions, but it's all clear through the Local Government Act and the bylaw.
Okay. And one more that wasn't discussed at the meeting, but 15th Street Bridge is closing today. That's for paving the approaches and the surface. Is expected to be closed for about a month.
That's our hope. It's going to be only a month. When we got it opened in January, we knew that we just put temporary surface on it, decking, and the bridge approaches couldn't be completed, obviously, in the winter months with frost and all that. So we opened it temporarily and put temporary matting down. It's closed today. Repairs will begin now to remove all that temporary decking and things, and we'll finish the approaches as well as the paving of the bridge deck. We're hoping it'll be a month, and that's weather dependent on that.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Trent, anything?
Well, I've got too many to ask in this meeting.
All right. Thank you. Recess to close, please. Oh, Brenda, sorry.
Just to that motion, you'll need to add item 4.5, according to 91,
Sorry?
with that motion that was brought forward.
Oh,
Regarding
for
temporary
Duncan,
use.
for temporary use? Thank you. All right, move recess to closed, adding 4.5 into that. Councillor Rogers, Councillor Schumann, all in favor? Opposed, carried. We'll take a 7-minute break and